Hi all, and welcome to another episode of Screenwriters Rewatch, a series where we venture into IMDb's top 200 film list, pull out some classics and look at them to see whether or not they deserve their place in film history and in the script department vaults, located in the Lunar Studio secret vaults sandwiched somewhere between the thin holiday catalogues of the Sea Haven travel agents. But before we get going, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and check out our previous episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember that you can always pop over to the Script Department website to see what's going on with our global network of screenwriters. And keep your ears open at the end, and we'll let you know what we'll be rewatching next week. Today, I'm joined by John as we put our own sense of existentialism to the test and break the fourth wall into tune in and rewatch The Truman Show. Now, I've raided Sylvia's campaign box for a "How's it going to end" badge, but John, what are you bringing to this rewatch?
I remember going to see this film on opening weekend in the cinema, and I was in primary school, maybe my first year of secondary school, and this new kid had transferred into school, and I was a huge Ace Ventura fan, a huge Mask fan, a huge Jim Carrey fan, general Batman Forever, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember saying, "Oh, we should go see the new Jim Carrey film. It's supposed to be hilarious. He's like in this movie set, and like, you know." And then I went to see it, and by the end, I was like in tears watching it, and I was like, "Why am I crying at this like Jim Carrey movie?" Because up to that point, like for me, Jim Carrey was like meant to be like childish humor, kind of, you know. And this was like my awakening to like, oh, movies can be more than what they appear to be. You know, you think you're just getting this kind of haha laugh out loud. Jim Carrey doesn't know he's an actor in a movie or a TV show, you know, and then you realize, wow, there's something bigger happening, or there's something more profound happening here. And I remember coming away, we weren't as jovial as we were going in. And it was just like this movie had really affected us. So I have really strong memories of going to see it, and I do cite this film as being one of those kind of I don't know, wake up moments for me, or like one of these kind of educational moments for me about the power of cinema, and how cinema can just surprise you, and how you can be laughing one minute and it can just punch you in the gut the next. And that's what this movie is, and I just think it's a masterpiece. Yeah.
Did you leave the cinema feeling as though you were being watched in every mirror and every corner?
No, but I did, for like, and even to this day, I get the temptation to, like, if I see a bar of soap, I want to draw a space helmet on a mirror, you know, and do the, you know, and I'd like, to this day, it is like there's like a kid in me that just wants to do that. And I do think there's some, like, this film is just such a funny film, but it's a very different kind of humor to what I would have expected going in. I think a lot of people would have expected. And I think it's why Jim Carrey was cast in this, because this is meant to be that kind of sucker punch movie where you are left breathless by the end in all the best ways, you know.
There's a lot of psychology in this film, and I think that what makes it really clever in the comedy is that we're seeing what films normally try and hide, that, you know, that kind of awkward behavior that we have behind closed doors, and it's funny because it's so relatable. So when you were watching it this time, did you find anything new? Did you anything that made you kind of go, "Oh, I didn't spot that last time"?
I'd say the last time I watched it was a few months ago. Actually, I didn't watch it again just for this one, and the reason why is because I teach this a lot, and so I know this film backwards and forwards, really. But I've become very aware of the, you know, it's like Shutter Island, it's like Fight Club. It's, you know, once you know the kind of the mechanisms of the story, and there's so much fun in going back and rewatching and seeing how different characters interact and the kind of lines that they're choosing and so on. And I think I always forget just the kind of the overt product placement in it, and I forget the kind of little references. I keep forgetting Burbank, for example, like Burbank Studios, you know, or Burbank, the city of Burbank, where all this stuff gets filmed in real life, you know, and all just those little things just kind of slip my mind. And when I watch the film again, I'm just like, oh, how clever, you know, and all that. So it is hard to tell if I'm discovering stuff new, or if it's just I've forgotten stuff, because there is a lot going on in this. Like everything is a very well-oiled machine, as a great movie production should be, and it does feel like you're like when you know the kind of full scope and the full extent of what's going on. I mean, we know going into this show, into this movie, what is happening, but I don't think we fully appreciate the scope of how big this endeavor is, and the amount of people employed to make it work and so on. And when you go and watch him going to work every day, like there's the routine every day, and he's noticing the stuff, and you start noticing it before he does. And so there's almost like, in many movies like this, I think you would be inhabiting the character of Truman, but I think we're actually inhabiting Lauren, the Lauren character, where like she knows what to expect, as do many of the audiences, and we know what to expect, and we are the guy in the bathtub watching. We are, hoping he'll escape, hoping he'll get out, all that kind of stuff. So I think on repeat viewings, I think the positioning of the audience changes, and we become a different character in that show. I think the first time we are Truman, but I think by the time you get to the second or third viewing, particularly when you know this film very well, you become the guy in the bathtub then, who's been watching this for years. And that's kind of, I think, what I take away from repeat viewings actually is the way my knowledge and my expectations inform who I kind of align with then in terms of characters and my positioning in it. And I do think this is a masterclass in screenwriting from all those kind of things like positioning and so on. And yeah, so that's kind of where I come from. Like, what do you, when you go and rewatch this, what are you discovering?
I think, like you, it's making those connections with the other types of films and why I like them. I really like to introspect over that. And you mentioned, sort of Fight Club, and Shutter Island, and you can think of infinite amount of sort of hoodwinking films like The Matrix and the Lego Movie Free Guy, and even recently, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but 1899 on Netflix is one I really recommend for that similar kind of rewatch feeling, where you just digest it again in a different way. And there's an episode of Black Mirror called White Bear, which is absolutely genius at getting you to change your perspective. Your empathy changes halfway through the episode because you learn something about the character. And I think you're absolutely right. You're kind of, you start the film in, following Truman, and then when you understand this restrictive world that he lives in, you want him to escape, and you feel so keenly how much you want him to escape. And every single time he tries to go forward, he's thwarted by the next thing, and you do feel for him. It's a really powerful ending, and it has a lot of connotations with man versus God as well. And I love they're not understated about it. They put Christoph in the moon, and when he talks to him, it's like the clouds are parting and things like that. And it there's a lot of Adam and Eve and the Book of Genesis with this sort of becoming truly conscious and self-aware. And Sylvia is very much the temptress. She's trying to tempt him to this tree of knowledge type scenario, that will ultimately cast him out of this Eden, this very protected environment where he doesn't really have to try very hard and everything's provided for him, and then out in the real world. And I think that's something that I love about the ending, is you don't see what happens on the other side, but what we know about reality television and what it's like for people even just to be in the Big Brother house for a couple of weeks, to step out of something where he's been in there for 30 years. He's the most recognizable person on the planet. How do you cope with that? And I love that the story just keeps going in my head onwards. There's longevity in it, which is brilliant.
I fully believe that there will be I don't know, an Apple TV or Netflix or Warner Bros. Whoever has the rights to this now in terms of catalog. I think you could very credibly get a Truman miniseries once off, where it's been 30 years since, or 20 years, or however long, since more than 20 years now, isn't it?
Mm.
But
That makes
30,
me feel
40
old.
years, whatever it is. Yeah. And it's Truman, and what's happened since, and the kind of the struggle he's got now. And it could be because the Truman Show has aged like fine wine. I mean, that was so ahead of its time. I mean, there are people now there are kids growing up in front of YouTube webcams that they don't even realize it. Their parents are YouTube influencers. Like, I watch a channel, Paolo from Tokyo, because I'm very interested in Japanese culture and Japanese life. And this guy, he married a Japanese woman. He's got a child, and he just shows his day-to-day life, and he kind of shows different things going on in Tokyo and so on. This is really interesting, but like, his kid has no idea that he's growing up, and his videos are getting like 1 million hits a pop, and that's a huge audience that are going to be, by the time he's a teenager, if they continue doing that. Like, this stuff isn't unusual now, and this movie is so ahead of its time. Like, we talk about Star Trek and the way that informed technology, like the way, like, tablets and stuff like that. Or we talk about different movies and how they were ahead of their time in terms of tech or in terms of their vision for the future. But we never give Truman Show nearly enough credit for the way it has predicted or foreshadowed our obsession with reality television now. And it wasn't a thing in 98. This would have been a film that was written in 97, 96 maybe. If
Mm.
it came out in
I think
98,
some of the first drafts were around 92, which is like really,
yeah,
really before any of that.
yeah, that's
Um,
seriously ahead of its
yeah.
time. Yeah.
But even the,
Um,
the very vague fly on the wall type things, I can remember watching The Real World, and I think Big Brother must have come shortly after this. And it wasn't as intense as the film makes it, but you can recognize those elements in the way they do fly on the wall nowadays. How much more the uninvasive those cameras are, and how much sort of your guard is down. And like you say, all the YouTube, everyone, I think we don't check ourselves as much as perhaps we used to when we put ourselves in the public domain. So it's interesting to sort of take this naive person and put them into a very carefully orchestrated nuclear American dream situation and see how they cope with it. And it's a theory that stems right back to Plato with his allegory of the cave, and the idea that right at the very end, when Christoph gives him the choice, you can go back into the cave. You don't have to go out there and face the monsters. And he decides that would be better than staying in there. And that's another, well, what if he had said, could you go back to living that lie? Could you really engage with it? Would it be as fun knowing that he knows what his world is like? It's an interesting
yeah.
idea.
No, but even just, I mean, even just on a basic level, it just speaks volumes about people's place and role in society, and the idea of, like, just stay in your place. Don't step out. Don't disrupt the system. Don't make a mess. Don't cause trouble. Don't try to be different. Like, routine is the key to survival, etc., etc., etc. And Laura Linney plays the dutiful wife who's actually pulling the strings, and she's got the voice to God, she's got the direct line, and she can pull in she's got power and influence, she can make something happen, or she can make, uh, if they need to disrupt things in order to keep Truman in line, like, she can make that call and make that happen. I get the feeling, she's not, she's almost like the second unit director, almost, on the ground, adapting, and kind of, that's how I kind of view her. And it's she's the kind of the immediate antagonist, but then behind every great antagonist there's a real person. Everybody answers to somebody, and you can look at, hero's journey, ideas and so on, and there's always that bigger being that's over. You know, usually God or something, but it's always, um, you know, look at any Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, any big franchise, Marvel, you name it. There's always that immediate villain, but there's always that big guy up there in the tower looking down, and you know, with a bigger plan in place. And Ed Harris is perfect in that, and then Laura Linney is perfect down on the ground then as the immediate antagonist. It's just brilliant character arrangement. It does not feel contrived. It um, doesn't feel familiar either. Like I'm not watching this and thinking, "Oh, I know exactly where this is going." Like it's just something about the arrangement of characters as well. It's just really really striking. You got the love story, and there's no love story in it. Like the woman,
Yeah,
he never
yeah.
meets the woman. It's
No,
you know, it's brilliant.
it's
Like,
the
and it's so
idea, isn't it?
powerful. Yeah, you
It's
like
the
in my
idea.
mind, I have this idea of them running into each other's arms, and I
Mm.
have to remind myself that didn't happen. That's just in my mind. Like that's
Yeah,
just like I assume that when he opened the door, she's waiting to hug him, and it's not. Like, of course, that's not what's happening. But the way it's just all built up, you just believe so much in the outcomes of this and everything, and we're seeing stuff that never actually happened.
yeah,
Like, or
yeah.
we're imagining things that never actually happened in the movie.
Exactly.
What does that say? You know.
So there's an incredible amount of attention to detail in this film, and when I watch it, I feel as though before I have a chance to ask a question and smash the idea and go, no, this wouldn't happen because it feels like they answer the question straight away. How do you feel about the attention to detail? Because sometimes too much detail, too much information, too much of it kills an idea a bit. But how do you feel? Do you think they got the balance right?
In terms of the conceit of the narrative conceit of this giant moon shaped, it's not. It's a dome, isn't it? It's a dome. Sorry, he's up in the moon, isn't he? There's the dome in California that's visible from space and all that kind of stuff. Like in terms of the conceit of all of that, I think they give you just enough to that you can buy it. Like I think that you accept it, like in terms of the detail of the world building. That's the kind of thing that interests me because from a screenwriting point of view, I'm a big fan of. Like I've always said, Nolan is the master. Christopher Nolan's the master of being able to write anything, no matter how ludicrous it sounds, because he knows how much detail to give you to make it credible. Like we're not going to explain how you can go into dreams and steal people's ideas. We're not going to explain why we need architects and how those architects put stuff into people's dreams. Like we're not going to bother explaining that. They're just these things. Just go with it. And he even says as much in Tenet. And I think Truman Show is one of those kind of films that gets away with murder. Actually, to be honest, it is ludicrous when you think about it out loud how that would even be possible. But you get away with it. Westworld pulls that off as well, like the way in which they're able to build this theme park, and you're thinking, this is like what? How does this even like? Where do you can get the land for something like this? And it all makes sense because they just don't. They're not as interested in that question as you are. So eventually, you lose interest in that question too. And I think it's a really important example of, yeah, less is more sometimes if you want to make it credible. And the more you explain something, the less we believe it. It's like a bad liar will always try and over explain where they were last night.
Yeah, that's a
And it's
really good
like, but you
analogy.
said you were, you know, and it's you start pulling holes in it. Whereas a confident liar would just say, yeah, I was out with friends. And you just say, oh, okay. And you just fill in the blanks yourself, you know. And that's I think great cinema is like that, where less is more actually, and we have the and I think Truman Show does that really well. It doesn't you don't ask the questions like where do the crew live or how are they miking people up or like how is he not noticing the lapel mics or how has he never stumbled upon a microphone ever like you know in his years of existence like or just the simplest of things to cover a broadcast. I mean just even doing this podcast we have to check to make sure our mics are plugged into the right like you know um and this was 1998 so I think they really handle it well from that point of view to convince you to buy into this the reality of this world. um what are you I don't know. Are you sold on it, or how in terms of the details?
I think I am, and I think you're right. And I think they do such a good job of making you realize there's more important things to focus on in this film here, apart from, you know, the actual logistics of making something like this really happen. And because they've picked this very 1950s-esque approach, even though it's, you know, it's very 90s in their style of some of the style of clothes and car and things like that, because there's a bit of a timeless notion to it. In the real world, it could actually be 2050. You wouldn't know. They've just
Wow, you
picked
just
the
blew
most
my mind right
ideal.
there, Helen.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
But they,
amazing. Actually, I never thought of that idea. Actually, is the world outside the same as the world inside? I never even thought of that.
yeah, and I think you know, when you think about it, most people they'll always over romanticize the past. They will idealize a time in the past and think, oh, it was lovely to. I would love to have lived in the 40s. Well, you wouldn't, because there was a big world war and rationing, and it was
Yeah,
grim.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, you know, but everybody wants to, you know, put their hair in victory curls and you know, wear pearls, and we just romanticize a moment in time. And I have always felt that about the Truman Show, that I feel like we could be as hoodwinked as Truman in believing that this is there and then, but it's not. So I would be, if there was a spin-off, I think it would be interesting to see how they depict it. You know, maybe they're not actually you know, where they say they are.
It is
It's
strange,
endless.
actually, that Ed Harris is a puppet master of sorts in Westworld as well. These two worlds where people are waking up and realizing that they're just toys on a board, you know, for other people, you know, to get their entertainment. And clearly they're miles apart in terms of style and tone and so on. But uh, this isn't the first time Ed Harris has played the powerful, mad as a mad as a hatter kind of. You know, even wears the black turtleneck as well. Like he's very much the man in black, you know, in both films or both projects. It's
He's
yeah,
not in the Lego movie as well, is he?
he might be, maybe.
Yeah,
No, he's probably not. But
probably good.
I never ever thought actually about time and tech and how that all evolves, and the idea that does the world of the Truman Show adapt and grow? Like how closely aligned is it to our development as a society and our progression as a society outside that dome? Like, do they talk about certain things? Like, if it was still happening today, or if it just existed for a few more years after we saw it, would Truman be aware that 9/11 happened? Would he be aware that, would they use 9/11, for example, as a way to kind of make him say, you know, bad things happen out in the real world, man. You want to stay at home. You want to stay on the island. Like, it's safe here. You know, it's nice here. Is all like elections. Do they even, is he raised to believe that he's in a dictatorship or something? Like, don't worry about it. It's just, we've got a great leader outside and he's just great. He does everything perfect. There's no problems. The world is great, you know. But then they're also trying to scare him into wanting to stay. And so maybe they lean more into the idea of, like, there was war yesterday over in the Middle East or something, like, I don't
But
know.
they didn't have to tell him anything about the world. It could have, you know, the world could just have
Yeah.
been this island, you know, or I mean, you'd have to explain an awful lot away, but they've chosen to tell him places like Fiji exist, and, you know, from a very young age, that there's a map of the world, and they sort of they stunt that curiosity by giving him this phobia of water, which I think you is believably I think you can believe that he would have that phobia. And it's interesting it's as a character journey, it's interesting to see him overcome that. His desire to be free, to discover the truth, is greater than his fear of the water, of what happened to his dad. And that moment at the end where he literally crashes into the fourth wall. And I'll never forget how it felt watching it in the cinema, and just all of a sudden just jumping, because it does look like the horizon, and
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
real jolt. And just when he's trying to break free, that's the bit that I can imagine what you were saying earlier about leaving the theater quite emotionally kind of
Yeah, you're
taken
drained.
aback. That's really powerful. Um, So there's quite a few. There's a cross medium here. It's a film, but it's about TV, and it's told in a way that you would expect to see on television. So it's sort of set around this 30th anniversary. So there's a lot of interviews. There's a lot of flashbacks, and it sort of is very cleverly it interviews the actors, and it very cleverly uses that structure to fill in the backstory that we need. How do you feel about that cross medium?
It's very cleverly done. It is a really wonderful example of understanding the medium that you're writing for. It never loses its cinematic quality. It never tries to convince you that this is a documentary that you're watching. It's very clearly, we're watching a film, piece of cinema. If this was framed as a documentary, like an episode of the show, I don't think we would have seen the drama of the waves crashing and all that kind of stuff in the same way. I don't think we would have had those kind of discovery moments and those kind of energetic and frantic moments as much. So it never loses sight of what it's trying to be, which is a work of cinema. But I love the cleverness of the um the the framing device of the anniversary episode, and it's never overused, I don't think, because I remember watching it when I was rewatching it, I was thinking, oh, did I forget? Like, is it actually this? Like, because I don't want the Truman Show to be a fake episode of television. I want it to be a work of cinema, and I want it to be cinematic in its very nature, and because that's kind of what this movie is as well. It's a man trying to break out of a small box, and TVs were small boxes in '98, and he is trying to be bigger and larger and see a grander canvas. And it almost seems like there's a very clear conflict in terms of an intentional conflict between the way the story is told. Like, there's the cinema trying to break out of the TV. And that kind of sounds cheesy as I said out loud, but I do feel it's in there as a kind of a stylistic choice. And it never, the cinema is the cinematic nature of the story is never buried by the TV. So I like it. I really like the way it's done. I don't feel it's mishandled. And it never feels like they're trying to convince us of something that we know we're not watching. And I think a lesser storyteller would have fumbled with that a bit, I think.
Do you feel, because it kind of, for want of a better word, it's his perspective, and then it's the perspective of, we're watching it how a viewer would watch it, then we're having an interview, then it's as though it's a normal film. When we're in that lunar studio, it is very sort of typically cinematic. There isn't that, you've lost all of that television context, really. And then you go back and you kind of you're digesting those different mediums. Do you feel that they all work in sync, or do you think it would have worked slightly better if they'd stuck with one concept more?
I think it works because it serves the value. It serves the idea that we will ultimately start shifting our positioning away. Like, at the beginning, even if we're still getting that documentary frame around it, or that kind of reality show frame around this movie, we're still very much gravitating towards Truman. We want to be handcuffed to this guy. We want to explore this world with him. We want to discover this world with him. But they're still giving us these glimpses. They're still reminding us that you are also a complicit spectator. And by the time Truman understands everything and has kind of caught up with us as an audience member, where we then start positioning ourselves more as a member of the production, or more as a member of the audience, wanting him then to break out. And I do think this kind of ties in with the one of the reasons I teach this a lot is the way it uses active questions. So an active question is the question that an audience is asking themselves, or looking for answers on. Like, a whodunit is a perfect example of an active question embedded into the genre itself. Like, who killed this person? So this is the thing we are watching this movie for. It's the reason why we're studying the frame. It's the reason why we're looking for answers, or we're suspecting this person, suspecting that person. And well written active questions can lead an audience in and out through the film in a certain way, where we can fall for certain tricks. We can be lured into thinking it's that person instead of this person, or whatever. In the Truman Show, they do this really good job of layering in active questions. It isn't just, will Truman learn? We know Truman will learn the truth. Our question is, how will he learn the truth? And that's something audiences are probably asking themselves all the time watching the Truman Show in this world is, will he find out today? Like, will he wake up to the realization? What will they do today to heighten the drama? And then will Truman, because it's almost a game that they're playing. It's this tightrope, that we want Ed Harris to inject drama into the world, but we also want Truman to be able to overcome that. But we don't want Truman to learn the truth, because in that case, it's all over then. And so I think we as an audience in the show, and as an audience watching the movie, you're waiting for him to catch up. And then it's, what's he going to do with that information when he does catch on? And that's kind of what leads. And those are the questions that I think the filmmakers are wanting us to be thinking about. So I think as much as we are handcuffed to Truman in this, because he is the hero and he wants to break out, and we all kind of want to break out of those kind of mundane aspects of our own lives. We want our lives to be more interesting than they are sometimes. And we don't want to find out that this is all that's been written for us. We want to be able to go out and make our own journeys and so on. And we might love our jobs, but if somebody said this is the job you will have for the rest of your life, it might be like, ooh, I don't know if I actually want this job now, and you might love your job, so like, no matter what, we just don't like the idea of things being mapped out for us in life. And it's so many movies are built on that premise, of just writing your own journey, breaking and making your own destiny. And so I think we want to be handcuffed to Truman. We also we are naturally the audience. We've seen the trailer, we've seen the poster, we know from the name, The Truman Show, this is a TV show. And so, long answer to an easy question, but I think my point is, it works so perfectly that we find ourselves in both situations, both perspectives, and they interchange quite well. And I think all that is down to great active questions and just masterful storytelling. Yeah. So I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect writing. Yeah.
It's very good at starting us off with that really close up perspective, and we are that audience, aren't we? We are the consumer, and it does gradually pull away. And it's the moment that he disappears from the basement that we realize, oh, hang on, we're not with him anymore. We don't know what's going to happen. We are, like you say, part of that production crew, and we are discovering it with them. We join Truman when Christoph finds him again, and then we leave Truman. We don't get to follow him out of that door. We stay in that world completely. So in a way, we're the ones that are left in the box, and he's not.
Yeah, and we're playing Truman's game at that point.
Yeah,
which I think works really well. As well, it is a really great. It's like a video game come to life. It's like you cited Free Guy a while ago. It's very much that idea of you're just turning the tables on those people who mapped out your life. And it is one of the most fundamental kind of story ideas in cinema is, I'm not going to do what you tell me anymore.
Do you think, in a way, sort of by a twisted, once removed point of view, that because we are the people that are watching it, we're the consumers, we're demanding this attention, this entertainment, that we could be seen as an antagonist? And when you think about us having that freedom to turn the TV on and off and leave him, for this kind of to be switched right at the end, that we're the ones that can't leave and he can, we're the ones sat there without anything to watch anymore, and he's off doing his own thing, that this whole antagonist protagonist relationship, we have the opposite goals, and we're the ones that have lost out. He's won. Do you think you could see yourself as the antagonist in Truman's story?
I think so. I think this boils down to just great character positioning again. Hitchcock was really good at this. If you look at Psycho, when Norman Bates looks through the peephole at Marion Crane in the shower, or I don't think she's in the shower when she's getting ready or something, but we are complicit because we look through the peephole. We're forced to look through the peephole. Hitchcock doesn't give us a choice, but if you kind of look at explore through the kind of the male gaze and so on and so forth, there's an argument that we want to look through the people. There's a seductiveness to what Hitchcock is presenting us with, and so I do think this is a very seductive film as well. Like Jim Carrey is a very funny, very obviously a genius comedian, and then that translates into a really likable character that we want to hang out with, we want to spend time with. It makes us feel good to be able to be in this world, feel like we're living in that world with him. But we also have the safety of just being, we're the audience really at the end of the day. And it's but in playing both sides, we do become complicit. And I think in that respect, we are, in the same way we are complicit in Marion Crane's murder, because we humored Norman Bates's desires, and we're not. It's the same here. We're not disgusted by the idea that Truman is doing this, and I do think it's very interesting that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does Truman's his birth and the story around his birth, that's not right at the beginning, is it?
No, I don't think so. I think it is quite close to the beginning, because it's sort of, because we're starting with this this kind of 30th anniversary. We are introduced to this the studio visible from space, and out of all these babies he's picked, and through this journey we watched him, or the whole world has watched him take his first steps, and things like that. So I think that concept is brought in quite early.
Because I had this memory of it coming in a little bit late into the first act, where, and I could be wrong, so forgive me, but it was the idea. But in my memory, I like that idea. If that was the case, I like it, because it's like, you've sold me on why this is a good thing. You've sold me on why I like I want to see Truman. I want to see him doing his thing, and now you're making me feel guilty afterwards, Whereas if you'd shown me, hey, do you want to see a show about a guy who was plucked from obscurity when he was a baby, and he was just taken from his parents and raised in this... No, I don't want to see that. That sounds horrific. That sounds like the worst thing you could possibly do to somebody. And then, he's in his zoo, basically, and it's like, no, I don't want to see that. I don't want to go, But I think by showing me this guy very early on, as an adult, and making me laugh and making me chuckle and all that, and then showing me him as a kid, it's like, you can't back out now because you've already bought the ticket.
That's it. Yeah, it's character before plot,
exactly. Yeah, and I if that's not what they've done, maybe they should have done that. I don't know.
So was there anything that didn't work for you, or is this film just through and through something that you think is flawless?
It's a very 90s movie, and so there are certain kind of... It's got nothing to do with, I think, the characters or anything like that, but it's not... It feels of its time, I think, just in terms of maybe the style of filmmaking or something like that. I don't quite know how to put my finger on it. There's nothing about this that makes me say, "Oh, I don't think I could watch that again." This is a film that I will always marvel at, I think, because of the just the brilliance of how it holds up. I guess you know what, we talked about attention to detail, and we talked about how they get away with the whole concept of the set by not explaining it too much. I think they could have gotten away with with explaining it a little bit less. Instead of showing me a dome, it might have been interesting instead just to show, instead of showing me where everything is, like Ed Harris is up in the moon, I think it would have been interesting to we have to kind of figure it out like Truman. And I think the idea of him like being out in the water, us thinking actually he's going to get away, and then finding like when he hits the wall is just like a big wake up call to the audience watching in the cinema. Holy crap! There's actually a wall here, and then you realize, okay, we're in a dome of some sort, or we're in a set. Whereas I feel like you're depriving the audience maybe of the idea that, because when he's on the boat, you know he's going to just hit a brick at some point. You know, he's going to hit a wall at some point because we know he's in a dome right from the very beginning. And I think it's interesting that your imagination has the freedom to explore that world a little bit more when you think, is this just a town in America that's in on it? And then you realize, oh, there's a wall. Okay. And like that wall is suddenly surprising. Think of the first time if you watch Fleabag and you never saw any of the marketing or any of the clips on social media or anything, and she just looks at the camera the first time and you're like, oh, wow, okay. You know, the first time a character does that in a movie, it's like, oh, it's unexpected. You know, you're not expecting them to do that. And it is, we call it breaking the wall because it is, it's aggressive, you know. And I think they could have, I think that him hitting the wall in the boat would have been more aggressive, more wake up, like a real wake up twist. That could have been actually considered one of the great twists of the 90s, up there with The Sixth Sense and all that. And Fight Club even.
Yeah.
If they hadn't over-explained the set. So maybe that's that's my only kind of criticism with it, I think. I do think Ed Harris overplays. He chews the scenery a little bit as well as the artiste, you know? Like, and it's a bit, you know, of course you've got the turtleneck. Yeah, it's a bit cliche. Yeah. He doesn't, like they named.
But was it cliche for the 90s or is it cliche for us now? I think that's another tricky question.
Maybe. He does have the Steve Jobs look to him. You know, that iconic Steve Jobs look. He definitely has that going for him. I've never heard Spielberg or Scorsese talk the way Ed Harris talks, and I do feel it was written by somebody who thinks that's how a pretentious artist should speak. And maybe it's just there to vilify, you know, to just make us really dislike him. It's a very easy way to kind of make us think, ugh, you know, stop trying to patronize us, you know. But I'm a firm believer that make a person a real credible genius at their craft, and I'll be terrified of you if you're a villain. I'll respect the hell out of you if you're meant to be somebody that I need to respect. You know, like credibility in your craft is, and I do get the feeling that he might never have done the big Hollywood blockbuster movies or something. Like, I'd be very interested to know what Ed Harris's character is. Christoph, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Christoph. What Christoph's IMDb profile looks like.
Yeah.
Do you know, before the Truman Show? I think that would be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
What kind of movies did he do? But also, he's been doing this for decades, presumably.
Yeah. Watching him grow up.
Yeah, is that credible as well? I don't know. I feel like maybe actually a little less detail is needed here. That's my only thing.
So you mentioned about the set, and how did you feel about him just being able to access a fire exit door in the middle of the wall, just where he had crashed his boat, and just being able to leave that easily? How did you feel about
that? I can forgive it. I never actually thought of it until you mentioned it. Actually, it's very, very evident. Good fire safety at the studio. You know, that's, I mean, like, credit where credit is due. You know, Christoph cares about his workers and stuff. So they obviously had good fire safety. I guess what's also interesting is the idea that he can have a big giant storm happen, and probably has them several times a year just for credit, you know, to make the world feel appropriately scary for Truman. The other side of that door gets soaked probably. You know, that fire exit probably gets drenched. So I don't know what's on the other side, but It's, again, would we be? I don't think we would be having this question, having even talking about this if they restrained a little bit of the set, the mechanics of the set. Um,
I
and
think you could be right there,
yeah,
definitely. And it's ironic, isn't it? The battle he has to endure to get out, all of the struggle that Sylvia has trying to get him out of that. And actually, it was just a push the door exit that out of all of it. But getting to that point was the most challenging. It
yeah,
was just the irony of it. Um,
which is brilliant.
yeah,
Which is brilliant, actually.
it is, and I think it just heightens that emotion. It's that easy for you to leave, and you don't have to. You've got the option to stay, and you don't. And small fun fact, I actually, for those who are listening, I am actually wearing Sylvia's badge. You can't really see it on the camera, but it is. And I did wear this on my graduation because this film had such a profound effect on me when I first went to see it, and I couldn't stand the idea that some people are not in control of their lives, and it ultimately this is what has inspired me to do my course with you, John, and just really I feel for Truman really keenly that no matter where you are, what you're doing, you can take control of your lives, and I think it's a very inspiring message that you
Mm.
can choose to leave whenever you like and go on and do something else. So
There's
I
a
would take the fire exit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think I've very much been growing up, and maybe it was a side effect of watching this movie, but I was kind of in a similar mindset where I really didn't want to. I think I was afraid of having repetition in my life, too much repetition in my life, where it would be repetition that I didn't enjoy, I think, which I think nobody wants, obviously, but that kind of losing control of your life, or giving control of your life over to something else that you don't want to do. There's nothing wrong with having the same routine. If you're happy, then more power to you, but if you're not happy, you you want to, yeah, you want to have that. These films can be quite triggering in that respect, I think, and make you kind of want to have that wake up call moment. And there is the Jack Reacher movie with Tom Cruise. There is a scene that is the kind of the flip side, the dark flip side of that, where he points to a group of people working late in an office across the way from his motel, and there's like a cleaner cleaning, going around with a vacuum hoover, and while this person is still there in their white, shirt and black trousers, just like still typing away in the computer and exhausted, and and he says something along those lines. What would any of these people give just to change one decision in their life so that they could have something different? Would they be brave enough to actually take that step if it was presented to them? And Truman is the guy who did it. And in a movie that's about television and Hollywood and so on, that's like the big superhero kind of moment, isn't it? So he's a very profound heroic character in his own story in that respect, I think.
Yeah. So, what lessons can we take away from this? Is there anything that you feel after today's session that you're just gonna that's it, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna apply it to everything?
I think there's great structure in the story, great attention to structure, and again, simplicity where it needs to be. Doesn't get bogged down in the fact that they don't get too meta about the fact that he's a character that's been written. So you're not bombarded. You don't feel like you're getting a screenwriting lecture from Christoph when you're watching this. It knows its play. It knows what to do and what not to do. And it's a great example of kind of tonal whiplash. You can have great fun watching this, and then you just get blindsided with this emotional weightiness that the story has, and you're just left breathless. And it's and yeah, the great use of active questions as well. All of this at the end of the day is all centered around a great character. No one would be watching that show in that world if Truman wasn't a happy-go-lucky guy who suddenly plunged into trouble. And um and that's, again, that's what makes for great storytelling, is a character who's had the world turned upside down. And he literally has his world turned upside down. So yeah, I just think just pick any subject in screenwriting, and this
And
film has
yeah,
it. Great dialogue, great everything. It's
in spades, I'd say.
and
So do you think?
rewatchable value. You have to be able
Oh,
to go and rewatch
definitely.
a film.
It's
Yeah.
almost like an annual pilgrimage for me, I think, watching
Mm.
the Truman Show. So do you feel that it deserves a place in the script department vault?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is definitely one of those films that is a screenwriter's film first and foremost. As dramatic as the film is, as fascinating as the film is, as funny as Truman is, all the contributions that everybody brings to that film. This was a masterfully written film first and foremost. And I always say that there are some films that are brilliant films, but it's a combination of different factors that made it a great story. Screenwriter did some of the work, filmmaker did some of the work, and so on. This is a film where I think the screenwriter did all the work up front, and then the filmmaking just took it to a whole new level. And no disrespect to anybody involved in the making of the film, but that screenplay is just a masterclass in screenwriting. So yes, absolutely, and just frame the script in gold because
Mm.
it's did
I
it
think
win?
I'm going to join you. I'm going to put it in there. I think because of the way that it plays with perspectives and how we're brought into the fold and then we're removed from it. And I really I value very much how, as an audience, that you can change that empathy and you can feel, withdrawal symptoms from that story, bereft from the story afterwards because of that change of perspective and being pulled into something and then just abandoned. It feels very much how I think every really good film affects you, doesn't it? And that is why I'm going to definitely put it in the vault with you. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much for joining me to talk about the Truman Show. Next week, we will be watching Castaway or rewatching Castaway with Tom Hanks's film from 2000. And if you want to buy us a coffee, then that would be absolutely great. It will help keep our lights on and our studio cameras going. So it would be great if you could do that. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.